Continuing past, Chapter 9, CIA Philippines by Renato Constantino and Leticia R. Constantino. In 1949, there was a major crisis. Philippines faced a grave economic and financial crisis. Graft, corruption, and election spending are the aggravating factor, and the free trade is the fundamental cost. It was reimposed by the Bell Act, resulting to crisis and balance of payment deficit of $1,067 million. It is where imports are more than exports. U.S. President Truman allowed temporary modification of free trade relation. As time goes by, the American instrument for the intervention with the Bell Mission, Melbourne Mission, GSMAC, and the CIA. The Bell Mission and Conditions. In 1950, the U.S. Economic Mission surveyed the Philippine economic conditions at the request of President Quirino. After several months, it blamed the Philippines because of inefficient production, low income, excessive volume of imports, corruption, and more that caused for economic and social ill. The Bell reports recommend reforms. U.S. also grant $250 million in economic and provided the Philippine government would implement the mission's suggested programs. Quirino had to accede to further derogations of Philippine sovereignty. First, the choice of projects and allocation of funds would be entirely in American hands. Second, the Philippine government was bound to appropriate counterpart funds to finance the peso cost of aid projects. And third, Philippine government had to accept American overseers. Assemblers and packagers. Using American advisor influence over key control bank department, they distorted the operation of import controls. These firms used their allocation for essential imports to buy American capital goods in order to put up packaging and assembly plants. In contrary, many Filipino entrepreneurs were reduced to license packagers and assemblers of foreign product. Next is the military assistance. Another survey team for Melbourne Mission was sent to look into the military equipment needs of the Philippines Armed Forces. Joint U.S. Military Assistance Group role. The GSMAC was tasked to implement the Melbourne Mission recommendation and directed the reorganization of the anti-HAB campaign. First, GSMAC changed the military orientation from one of defense against external invasion to one of maintenance of internal security. Second, GSMAC had to complement constabulary merged with the armed forces and placed under the office of the Secretary of National Defense. Third, GSMAC directed the organization of battalion combat teams. And finally, GSMAC was also responsible for the complete revamp of the intelligence agencies of the Philippine government. The National Security Council report states that the security interests of the United States required that the Philippines became and remain stable, anti-communist, and pro-American. NSC also report negative assessment on leadership on Quirino administration that had to be taken care. Philippines immediately have to build up a leader who could recapture the people's confidence. American choice was Ramon Magsaysay, who is undoubtedly loyal to the U.S. For this build-up, the fine hand of the CIA and its expertise in court operation would be used. Magsaysay became guerrilla leader and used his wartime credentials and connections as the basis for political career. He built up a sizable political base in this manner. Magsaysay joined the Liberal Party and became official candidate for congressman in Zambales. He also became chairman of the Committee on National Defense. He met CIA's Lieutenant Colonel Edward O. Lanslade. American choice. By the choice of the U.S. Ambassador and GSMAC Chief Quirino appointed Magsaysay as the Secretary of National Defense. In August 1950, CIA Operative Edward Lanslade sent to the Philippines as the military advisor attached to GSMAC. He was actually the chief of CIA's Office of Policy Coordination in the Philippines. Lanslade previously served in the Philippines from 1941 to 1948, so he was well acquainted in the Hope problem. He became one of Magsaysay's closest advisors. Counterinsurgency. Magsaysay has three objectives. First, the Philippine government's urgent need to eliminate the HMB threat. Number two, his own political ambitions. And three is the America's hegemonic goals in Asia. The first requirement of the counterinsurgency program was the revitalization of the armed forces. Quirino gave Magsaysay this additional power. Magsaysay transformed the armed forces organization into his private domain. Magsaysay also removed number of corrupt officers, but he himself was not above the spending patronage and pork barrel from the considerable funds at his disposal. One of Magsaysay's incentives to soldiers who killed hooks was promotions and personal letter of commendation. He also offered cash rewards for information and for hooks bodies. Photo raids. Quirino gives information to Magsaysay about hook leaders, the Shano Rizal, who apparently told Magsaysay that certain members are operating in Manila. On October 18, 1950, MIS raiding teams arrested 105 suspects and cordoned off truckloads of documents, weapons, money, and propaganda paraphernalia. Jose Lava, the General Secretary of the PKP, and two other political bureau members were caught. Next is the suspension of the unit. Magsaysay urged Quirino to suspend the writ of habeas corpus and later been suspended on October 21. Those arrested were charged and the highly ranking PKP were met with death or life sentence. Magsaysay became a hero one night. Psycho War. Armed forces are armed and equipped thanks to American aid and support of President and Congress. Military operations were backed up by psychological warfare tactics. Lanslade new Office of Psychological Warfare was renamed to Civil Affairs Office or the CAI, headed by Jose Gazyl. The CAO mounted a massive anti-hook propaganda campaign. GSMAC had help for the propaganda. The CAO organized anti-communist forums in universities and secretly subsidized an organization known as National Student Movement, which eventually became student arm of Magsaysay for presidential movement. Next is the cuddling the press. CAO paid attention to press and radio people. He became friendly and accompanied them with funds. The dirty tricks. Lansdale employed psychotactics that were used in two ways. First, to develop the correct appeals to win the population away from the hooks, and second, to devise all sorts of dirty tricks for use against the enemy. He used the common fear aswang to drive the unit away. The Sai War Squad planted stories about these. Other dirty tactics were used to enemy. The Ed Corps, Economic Development Corps, is one of the most successful propaganda projects by Magsaysay. As a program, Ed Corps impacts was negligible, but as a propaganda, it was a big success. The 10 centavos telegram. It is used as a program that enables the informant to send a one-page telegram to Magsaysay for only 10 centavos. To widen the support for his counterinsurgency work, Lansdale had been contacting different influential sectors. As a result, Chinese bankers offers to let raise funds for Magsaysay Community Wealth Project. Next is the savior. Magsaysay was being projected not only as the Hook's enemies, but also a new leader and hope of the common man. People began to see Magsaysay a leader with the best leadership. Magsaysay felt useful, flattered his ego, and was producing the right atmosphere for the political ambitions. The style of work. Magsaysay grew out of his job in terms of his earlier occupation as a transportation superintendent. He went everywhere, indulging his dramatic flair with surprise inspection, during which he handled out instant promotions. They did even more for Magsaysay image as a hardworking, no-nonsense kind of executive who achieved quick result. Magsaysay had a contact with local political and civic leaders and made himself available to the poor, a big asset for any politician. Magsaysay and his image builders, Lansdale CIA team, the Civil Affairs Office, and his pros in the press made the most of this advantage. The press build-up continued both locally and internationally. Widening contacts. Magsaysay developing support among important business circles. The industrialist Andres Soriano was responsible for Magsaysay appointments as chairman of the board at the Manila Railroad and later of Philippine Airlines. The election of 1951 became yet another milestone in the build-up of Magsaysay, also meshed in with American plans to better control the selection of future leaders. 1951 election could be used as a dress rehearsal for managing the election of 1953. This is the dress rehearsal. In 1951, the National Movement for Free Election was formally inaugurated. It actually run and funded by the CIA. CIA recruited Gabriel Kaplan from New York to sparkling its political activities. Kaplan and a team of Filipino went to work on business and civic groups to prepare the ground for NAMFREL. The PVA led by Jaime Ferrer issued a call for all kinds of organizations to join in the movement to ensure free and honest elections. A lot of enthusiastic response from different organizations joined, and quickly NAMFREL chapter were reorganized or organized throughout the country. The next step was to enlist the cooperation of the COMELEC. This was done without informing Quirino and other Liberal Party leaders. The commission also asked for the cooperation of NAMFREL and the Philippine News Service. Elections in 1951. Lanslate personally coordinated American participation in the drive for clean election. Ambassador Cohen spoke at the NAMFREL rally in Pampanga. In Washington, Secretary of State Dean Acheson made a speech stressing American concern that the coming Philippine elections be a real exercise in democracy. Finally, all prominent American publishers sent foreign correspondents to monitor the elections, and these were dispatched to areas where fraud and terrorism were expected. The military actively involved itself in the electoral campaign. The Civil Affairs Office worked with NAMFREL in the propaganda effort to get out the vote. The Commission on Elections deputized constabulary and army officers before the registration of voters. The Defense Department under Magsaysay became the main arm of the Commission and in effect was the supervisor of the political exercise. Modern Hercules. Magsaysay himself refused a liberal draft to run for the Senate, claiming he had no political ambitions. The Philippine Free Press portrayed Magsaysay as a modern Hercules fighting the hydra of political terrorism. Magsaysay and his trusted officers perfected their plans or preparing their plans for policing the polls, guarding ballot boxes, preventing intimidation of voters, and getting the returns quickly to AFD headquarters to prevent tampering of the result. As a result of all these preparations, all 9 candidates of Nationalista Party won, led by Jose P. Laurel, also a victory for armed forces. But the biggest gainer was Magsaysay. He was the man of the year, said the Philippine Free Press. A national hero, the face of the Pacific, the next president, said by the Time magazine, which carried this picture on its cover. Quirino's predicament. Quirinos continued to support Magsaysay despite some irritation over the fulsome praises to Magsaysay. In the aftermath of the 1951 defeat, liberal chieftains began to air their suspicions of Magsaysay, but Quirino apparently could not bring himself to doubt his defense secretary's personal loyalty. However, we cannot ignore the fact that whether Quirino trusted Magsaysay completely or not, the president could not move against an American boy without inviting complications. In a sense, his hands were tied.
The next step. After Magsaysay's successful supervision of the 1951 elections, his backers decided the time is ripe for a further glamorization of their man. They decided a carefully staged managed visit to the United States would enhance the defense secretary's stature and qualification for presidency. Lansdale and Manuel J. Dindo Gonzalez, president of Manila Lions Club, arranged for Magsaysay to be invited to keynote the Lions International Convention in Mexico City. He was the brother-in-law of Carreño's daughters. Early of May 1951, he had broached to Magsaysay the subject of the latter candidacy. Magsaysay spent 20 days in United States, where he received a hero's welcome. Quirino last days. Magsaysay gains popularity with American racist political staff. Because of his growing popularity, his American support in his control of the armed forces. Both parties are interested in him, but Magsaysay and his American backers were after the presidency. Judge Antonio Quirino, brother of Quirino, that was repeatedly accused of being involved that had greatly eroded Quirino's prestige. Also, Quirino was impossible to gain support from the American because of his tendency to make impulsive and ill-considered decisions, so that Americans chose Magsaysay as the next leader who could infuse new confidence, not associated with nationalist group in whom they could trust. The Grand Design, expansion of psychological warfare operation against communism. This policy was received with jubilation by the CIA. In the Philippines, this policy shift gave new impetus and high sanction to CIA efforts to elect Magsaysay president. Also, Americans were afraid might not survive for 4 years. Quirino, Magsaysay as president could become model for other nations in Southeast Asia threatened by communism. Magsaysay options. For Magsaysay, there were 3 routes to the presidency. First, he could run as Quirino vice president. Second, run as the Liberal Party standard bearer. And third, to be candidate of the Nacionalista. The overture. In August, Magsaysay made his initial overtures to the Nacionalista parties. He had strategy meetings and secret meetings. Senator Lorenzo Tañeda as the president of a small citizen party which was allied with Nacionalista. The Secret Pact. On November 20, Magsaysay signed a secret pact with Laura Recto and Tañeda that he will be the opposition candidate for president. On January 17, 1953, he secretly signed his anti-affiliation card. Quirino said he would keep Magsaysay in office as long as he was needed to kill hooks. And by that, Magsaysay got an excuse expressing his disappointment with the president's definition of his job as hawk killer. He declared he could not continue serving that was not interested in social reforms. The Nacionalistas suffered 7 lean years out of power and Magsaysay was their ticket to Malacanang. He was always humble and respectful, acknowledging their experience and seeking their advice. Furthermore, Magsaysay built his own extra-party organization led by men that are loyal to him, and some served to him was young business executives and professionals. MPM. The Magsaysay Inner Circle formed stepped into Magsaysay for President movement. The rationale for this exercise was not just for lingering fear of last-minute double cross, but more importantly, a demonstration of strength and political expertise by the Magsaysay men who wanted to retain control over the campaign rather than treat it as a appendage of the NPM machine. After Magsaysay nominations, his press build-up gained new momentum. He had article about an honest man with guns. Prominent columnist Joseph Alsop on that as practical matter, Magsaysay is the American candidate. Manuel Nieto, a Spanish mestizo, grew a mustache like Lansdale, seated on the campaign platform, and was made taken as American. Magsaysay believed that this gimmick will give more votes. Romulo's rule. There were 3 presidential candidates: Magsaysay, Quirino, Carlos P. Romulo. Romulo protested against the steamroller tactics of the Quirino forces. He was called as ignominious and a potential dictator.